G'day everyone and welcome to VUFOA-TV. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on his first ever Australian visit, Richard Dolan. Welcome to Australia, Richard.
Hi Ben, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
It's really good that you've come down here. There's been a lot of great UFO cases that have occurred here over the years, and with your extensive knowledge and research, I think it will only add and enhance to your experience personally on what's going on around the world.
Absolutely. I've always been interested in what's going on in Australia, but it's so beneficial to me. I've met a number of excellent Australian UFO researchers, such as yourself and many others. And what's clear is how deep and rich and widespread UFO sightings in this country have been over the years, and some of the most dramatic cases ever. Are right from here down under.
They absolutely are, and in Victoria here particularly, we've had our fair share of classic cases, which has been really good. And what's your impression been of the UFO field as you've seen it so far here in Australia?
I think what I'm getting. So I've been in Sydney. I'm here now in Melbourne, and I'll be in Perth and Brisbane. And already it's clear to me that there's a variety of excellent groups that are doing work here, and I really feel that what is needed is a kind of central repository and a little bit more coordinated organization of the cases, because it's very obvious if everything's put together. I think it would have a very powerful impact.
Yes.
So that we can just see get a sum total of what's been happening in Australia over the years.
Yeah.
And I think it's really possible, because it seems that everyone gets along pretty well with each other for the most part, which is not always the case in American ufology, but you guys seem to do a little better job down here. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for getting cases together and organizing it.
Absolutely. The positive thing about Australian ufology, I think now, as opposed to the past, it has been rather parochial, and there's been borders up at borders in states at different times. But now we've got a great relationship between Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. It's great to see Perth coming on board. Mm-hmm. There's not been a strong UFO scene in Perth, and you can't tell me that Western Australia is not a home for UFO activity.
Well, one thing that anyone who looks at Australian cases can see is that they are a perfect microcosm of what is going on in the entire rest of the world. Yeah. So you've got very, very explicit craft cases that have been seen. We're standing here at the Westall case from 1966, where we were just discussing this a moment ago. Yep. One of the most dramatic landing cases ever, with some of the most compelling witnesses ever. And so that's fascinating. And there are some other cases. We're not far from the famous and tragic Frederick Valentich case, which is of course very, very dramatic, in which this young pilot was lost over the Bass Straits in 1978.
Absolutely.
Where he was encountering a clear UFO that's obviously he died from his encounter. The Kelly Cahill case, which had a number of witnesses. There's so many of these where they saw beings along with landed craft. So it's all down here. It's all here in Australia. Dramatic, vivid, and I think in many cases well attested. That proves, that there is a phenomenon that is going on in this world. It is going on here as well as the rest of the world, that is not being recognized by our political authorities, by our scientific establishment. They ignore it, and that is to their shame. And it is really things that we need to get the rest of our society on board with, to have an open, honest discussion of something that's happening in our reality. Absolutely.
And I think the great thing is that here we are out in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and these things are occurring in our suburbs. They're occurring on our lonely, deserted roads. They're occurring to ordinary Australians going about their ordinary lives. And what we find is that a lot of these cases have occurred a long time ago, and now the preservation of these cases is absolutely crucial, so that today's generations, the generations of the future, can look back and they can see with a relatively detailed analysis that this information is being preserved. It's not just strictly disappearing from our suburban consciousness. So this case, Westall, where we are today, disappeared for many, many years after it actually occurred. Now, thanks to the documentary made by Shane Ryan and Rosie Jones called Westall, A Suburban Mystery,
Yes.
brings it back home that this phenomenon is interacting with us in our own backyards, and that's a special thing, and we need to make sure that we are preserving that.
Absolutely, this is key, and I'm really glad that you guys are putting together documentaries and just organizing as much data as you can with as many witnesses as possible, because that's the key. We need to get to the bottom of what it is we're dealing with, and hopefully ask some of the right questions, which is ultimately, after we've nailed down with enough data that there's something going on, we need to be asking, what is this?
Yeah.
Who are these other beings? Because that sure seems what dealing with is other beings. Certainly with technology that has not been acknowledged to this day, and yet it's going on. I really think that people who are following your channel, your website, and everyone else, we need to be guided by your bravery in putting this information out, and I think people watching this should be brave.
Yes.
That is, by that I mean, look into the evidence that their reality is not what they were told, your reality is not what you were told, and not to be afraid to discuss it with other people. I think the best way to make change is cultural, by more and more people discussing this openly, fearlessly.
Absolutely, absolutely, excellent point. And I think that, you know, people can think there's the great big cases out there around the world, the Rendleshams and cases like that, but if you look closer to home, wherever you are around the world, you will see that your local area has been touched by the UFO phenomenon at some point in time.
I will tell you, so I live in upstate New York, right across the lake from Canada, in the city of Rochester. And in the years that I have been in that city, I have spoken with hundreds of people who would say to me, oh, you're interested in UFOs. Well, let me tell you what I experienced 5, 10, 20 years ago, sometimes 6 months ago.
Yeah.
There's always, that's just my little town, there's always something going on. It's everywhere. I'm convinced it is everywhere around the world. What we really ideally should get at some point, hopefully, is a global reporting mechanism so that people around the world can report easily, even if it's a raw report that's not investigated. I think we would all benefit from getting a sense of what's going on in all of the parts of the world.
Absolutely. If you take the time to look at Victoria's UFO record, you will see that every region of the state has a UFO history. And I tell people all the time, people say, where do the UFOs appear? I say, they have appeared literally everywhere.
That's right.
That may sound like a nutty statement, but if you go back over the records of any particular area, and if they've been diligently prepared by people who are doing the right work, you can see that there is a history absolutely in every single location at some point in time.
I can tell you, in North America alone, there are 2 primary websites that will collect UFO reports from the public. And I have looked, I don't believe there's a lot of overlap between the two, and you're looking at essentially 13 to 15,000 sightings a year that are reported to those 2 sites.
Yep.
Now that doesn't mean that they're all alien craft, obviously, or even black budget craft, but it does mean that you've got about 15,000 sightings a year in North America that we have. We can assume that there are many, many more than that people are not reporting. So this is everywhere. And we're actually, we're outmatched in a couple of ways. I mean, maybe we're outmatched by whatever this phenomenon is, and maybe we can't help that, but what we can help is that we're outmatched in the sense that we're not collecting this data worldwide, and we have the ability at this point in 2016, moving forward into the 21st century, we have the ability to start collecting this data a little bit more effectively, and I feel that we really need to, around the world, to get, at least if nothing else, a general idea of how much of this we're dealing with. I have a feeling it's thousands and thousands around the world every year.
Absolutely, and as you say, that is something that is strictly within our control.
Absolutely.
Around the phenomenon, we can't control the phenomenon itself or when and where they appear. It's not like ghost hunting where you can go off to the old asylum, set up your gear and catch a resident. This phenomenon is that they can actually appear anywhere at any time. So it's almost like, it's even worse than trying to chase twisters across the Texas Panhandle. You never know where they're going to turn up. So I say to people out there, get out there, support your local UFO groups, the people that are out there putting in the hard yards to bring the information that you want to see. Come and see people like Richard when he comes to Australia and his talks around the world. Support the books that are written. Get involved with it yourself. If you have the interest, don't be armchair. try to get out there and have a look at what's actually happening.
I would add one thing, which is that this phenomenon that we're talking about, I firmly believe is the most fascinating phenomenon one could look at. I think it's on the fringe of what we're almost even able to understand. There's some intelligence that is operating behind this phenomenon. We can perceive it, we can record it, we can puzzle about it, and it is absolutely my belief that by studying the UFO phenomenon, we're pushing ourselves forward into the next phase of understanding about ourselves and about our world, scientifically, and much more. This is something that has the potential to move us forward, I feel, to the next phase of our development. And by the way, I think there's not many things that offend me in this world, but I'm offended by governments that lie to me.
Yes.
I'm offended when my government in the United States lies to me, and Australians should be offended when their government lies to them. And I really believe that by trying to get to the bottom of this phenomenon, it is our obligation as citizens of what is supposed to be a free society that we hold our governments accountable to us on this most very important subject, which has more ramifications than anything else that I can possibly think about.
Absolutely, it certainly does, and for the human race to develop, to take the next step, to move forward, we have to be thinking beyond the local squabbles around the world, the local issues. And I believe that every Australian, every citizen out there should be doing exactly what you're saying. We should be advocating for the release of the information that we all know actually exists out there. So
there are excellent researchers in this country who are doing really important work, and they need to keep doing what they're doing, and other people I think are just well served by looking into the topic. If nothing else, it opens your mind up to a world that you would never have thought. Happened to me 25 years ago when I jumped into the UFO subject, thinking, oh, I'll look at this for 2 or 3 months. Well, it grabbed me by the neck and has not let go. No. But it's been a fascinating journey.
It has been, and look, we all look forward to continuing that journey with you as you progress through, and also here in Australia, we're going to continue our work, bringing out the cases that the world doesn't know about. You know, there's a lot of Australian cases that the world doesn't know about, and there's people in this country working to bring out the old cases, investigate anything new that comes up, and document digging and keeping the governments in check as well. So, Richard, it's absolutely been great to have you here in Victoria, Melbourne, Australia. I wish you all the best in your future endeavours and for the rest of your Australian tour. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.